Thank you so much. You pronounced my name correctly. Thank you so much. Usually it's not pronounced correctly, so.
I'm glad. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, just perhaps before we go to the panel discussion, as it was already mentioned today, the European Union and India relation has progressed a long way since this letter from Mr. Nehru in January 1962. Of course, he was Minister of External. He sent a letter in his role as Minister of External Affairs. And then, of course, very soon after, there was first Indian ambassador appointed in Brussels. His name was Mr. Ambassador K.B. Lal. He presented credentials on 2nd of March. So I would say that EU-India relations at the beginning were very much focused on trade and economic affairs, trade and economic issues. And later on, then they were expanded with science and technology and education. And as we heard just a few minutes ago from the deputy head of EU delegation, Mr. Nidhi, now there is really a broad areas of cooperation, right? Not only trade and economy, also resource efficiency, circular economy, energy, environment. Here it's water issues, urbanization, clean air recently. Then we have, as we heard, climate change. I would say a very important area is also research and innovation. There was very successful joint programs in the context of Horizon 2020, which is supposed to carry over now with Horizon Europe. We also have Marie Skłodowska scholarships. We have space cooperation, education, health, ICT, as we heard, cybersecurity, digitalization, connectivity, but of course also foreign policy and security issues. In that context, there are many coordinations or working group meetings on counter piracy, maritime cooperation, counter terrorism, non-proliferation and disarmament. So we have quite a few major milestones since the establishment of the diplomatic relations. I would say that one of the big steps forward definitely was the opening of the EU delegation in India, which happened in 1983. And then perhaps I would mention 1994, when the EU-India cooperation agreement on partnership and development was adopted. And this actually still provides kind of a legal framework for EU-India relations. And I would also say that this agreement took our relations beyond trade and economic cooperation. So it also expanded it into the more, I would say, political agenda. Then, of course, we have 2000, the first EU-India summit in Lisbon. Then I would mention in 2004, the fifth summit, when our relations were upgraded to the strategic partnership. And then most recently, I think in 2016, we had India Joint Agenda for Action 2020 on the 13th summit. In 2020, as we heard, the important document Roadmap 2025 was adopted. And we also mentioned the last EU-India summit in Porto, Portugal in May last year. So as we can see, the development cooperation has deepened in the past and broadened in the past 6 decades. It also established different mechanisms, consultations, dialogues, joint working groups, study tours, visit exchanges, think tank cooperation, and of course, summits. And as the title of our panel is today, this is our task of today's panel, to discuss how have EU-India summits contributed to stronger and more strategic EU-India relations. So, and now, I don't know how you want to proceed, if you want to introduce the panelists, or we should just start with the questions.
Your Excellency, you can call upon each one of the panelists, and each one of the panelists can come on and present their point of view first, and then you can go in for question. Just 1 minute or 2 minutes for their points of view, and then you can go in for questions, Your Excellency.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll go in kind of the order which I put it in timeline. So I would first like to invite Prof. Stefania Benaglia, Associate Researcher from Center for European Policy Studies. And I would like to start. I hope she's here.
Hello, yes, good morning.
Oh,
can you
good
see
morning,
me?
Ronnie. Hi. So I would like to start with the summit in Porto in May in 2021. And why do you think this was characterized as a special summit? And what is your perception that what makes it different from the previous ones?
Thanks, and thank you also for the excellent question, because that really allows me to say a couple of words on what I really believe. Thanks for pointing out a couple of flagship summits, let's call it this way, before that happened. But more recently, I think with what we have seen in 2021 in Porto, we have seen a change in narrative, and we have seen kind of like, I think, the relationship really got at a different pace there. So what happened there? First of all, it wasn't really a summit. It was a leaders meeting. What is the difference here? The difference is that instead of meeting only the heads of the EU, so the top 3 guys or ladies, the Modi actually had the chance to meet all the heads of states from the 27 member states. So this is a much more extended, and I would say much more personal, because of course we all know that not all member states have the same capacity for a number of reasons to meet constantly with leaders such as Modi. So this was an occasion for all of them to meet and build this, bring the relationship forward, and also respectively at home to bring, if you want, foreign policy and India in particular a little bit closer to home. Because of course, one thing is if the head of the Commission of the EU, which is kind of 2 steps far away from the citizen from a member state's country, meets a leader, whomever this person is, but this is perceived as a little bit far away, if you want, from European citizens. The fact that the leaders, the prime ministers of all the countries actually met, and therefore you had a media coverage of those, and you had kind of like a different level of narrative that was said during this meeting. So this is a very strong diplomatic signal that was given, a very successful, I would say, and also quite a unique one, because frankly, in my lengthy observation of the EU foreign policy, actually quite rarely, and I would dare to say never, but never in history is always a very complicated word to use, but certainly very rarely. This is not common practice at all. This is a very unique honor that is given. And again, I have in my memory only India to be given. And this is, of course, also because, and the second point, which I think make this summit very important, is that this was from the beginning described as the highlight of the presidency. Now, frankly, foreign policy normally is not the highlight of European presidencies, because the EU is still doing its own homeworks. Of course, in the European community, in the foreign policy community, we have awareness about foreign policy, but frankly, foreign policy is not a mainstream topic of discussion for European citizens. They have much closer relation with economic discussion. So having, as a main deliverable of a presidency, taking a foreign policy and a partnership with a country which is not the transatlantic relation, which could be, a country with which you have historical relations which date from much longer. These are two very important signals, and they played out very well. And out of this, you have actually seen a shift of narrative, I would say. So coming from, mostly speaking, the narrative before was including a large degree of frustration, let's say, because this potential which we have to tap into, this narrative was present also in the media. But the click happened maybe 2020, 2021, these things is hard to actually pinpoint one day, but for sure in 2021, you have a shift in the narrative. And now when you talk about the partnership, the strategic partnership, you have a much more mature and much more positive view. So it's no longer, looking at the potential and trying to tap into the untapped potential, but this is an important strategic partner with whom we have to work in the Indo-Pacific. A complete shift in narrative. And I think on this aspect, we are just at the beginning. And just to finish, I think that, overall, the topic of this panel, maybe I don't know if I will have the chance to say it later on. So this is an important point, I want to make it, and maybe I will stress it again. I think for this specific relation, we have actually the diplomatic relation that are actually pushing and pulling the relationship more than, if you want, the economic community. And this is quite unique, if you want, because in many terms, the economic relation has been characterized as the most important relationship of the two partners. But as a matter of fact, you look at how the business community behaves, and there's still some degree of, working on the untapped potential, meaning that all the potential out there has not been really used by the business community. However, the political community, they are running out on a different speed. They see that they are pushing the bar higher every time. They are every time more ambitious, and they are actually capable of looking at the strategic partnership in the broader context. So I think that in this particular relation, we have diplomacy is, if you want, in a way, in the political world, policymakers are a step ahead. They're really the drivers. So I'm actually happy to have this panel, because I really think that is pointing the finger at one aspect which is not always looked at, and which I think is very important in this context. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I could not agree with you more what you just said, because actually I had experience with being in India altogether for quite some period of time. And I also noticed this shift in the past 2 years and the shift in the narratives that you just mentioned. If you could just perhaps answer quickly, what do you think will be the main challenges for EU-India relations going forward?
That is difficult to answer quickly, though, because I think the challenge is to bridge this gap. There is a high expectation, which are going higher and higher. However, the implementation is going at its own speed. So I think at some point there will be some questions asked, what are we doing here? And so I think the challenge will be leveling this gap and actually walking at the same pace and making sure that, all the ambitions are actually met by actions. And this is a discourse that is, of course, goes both ways. I mean, it's the community, both the communities, again, I broadly assess the policymakers on both sides being quite aware of all the potential and again, pushing and stressing. But this message needs to be communicated in a granular way to the civil society, both civil societies, in order to accompany these ambitions and make sure that actually the word passes into action. And then we move from, a joint agreement to actually do something out of this. But this is, again, maybe this is more of an internal procedure that we have to do, speaking about, again, what I said about the understanding of policy, foreign policy, what it is foreign policy, the role that foreign policy plays in internal matters from member states. I'm sorry to take, completely kind of like a parallel, but we as Europeans, at least, we have to do a little bit our homeworks of aligning our business community with our foreign policy, because, and was just watching the news and, just today, the Italian business community met with Putin and discussed business and the political war was like, sorry, not appropriate to discuss right now with Russia, given what is going on. And so here we have actually a need to bridge a little bit this. Of course, I mean, we all know that we are, realpolitik plays a big role, and we all know that at the end of the day, economic interests are what drive most of our actions. Yet. So this here we need here to do a little bit of alignment with our community, with our business community in particular, not only, but still.
Thank you so much. Very good thought for our thinking. I think you pointed the main challenge of implementation and aligning the interests between business and the politicians. If we can move forward now with the second panelist, with Mr. Yes?
Mr. There, one thing, if it's okay, can you ask the panelists to introduce themselves? They're doing some incredible work, and it'd be good to have them share their work for a minute. Even Stefania is doing very good work for the past few years. I think it's important for others to know her work. Okay. It's similar with other panelists.
Okay, so should we go back to Ms. Benaglia?
Yeah.
Please, Ms. Benaglia, a few words about yourself.
Thanks. Yes. So I am a EU-India expert. I've been working on EU-India relations for about 10 years, something. When I started, there were no EU-India relations at the time. And so I'm actually very, very privileged to have seen the progress of this relation. I work for a think tank mostly, CEPS, where I also cover Indo-Pacific and connectivity. So I will do my core business is actually these three topics, which I see very much one interlinked to the other. I also work with EU projects. I have been implementing the public diplomacy project in India for a few years now. And I will be working on other projects actually in the future, notably again on connectivity. So thanks again and of course I am a top 40, under 40 alumni. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure. I remember I was one of the lucky ones who actually got a physical meeting in Brussels. And I think, good days were those ones where we had this, I clearly remember this very, very pleasant and very good event that happened at the European Parliament and all the wonderful people that I met on that day. But I keep following this interesting initiative since then because it's always refreshing and you meet a lot of people and it brings a lot of different people together. So that is also quite a richness of this group. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And let's move now to Mr. I will not pronounce his name correctly, Aarein Uday Areti, Councillor at the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And I would just like to invite him first to say a few words about himself. Mr. Areti?
Yeah, I'm on mute. Thank you, Your Excellency, Mateja Vodeb Ghosh. I'm sure I got your name right as well. I've got more Slovenian friends in London. So,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, thank you for your contribution, especially for the India-EU relation and especially with Slovenia. And I see a lot of Slovenian citizens contributing to Indian economy, not just working for Indian groups, but also on the cultural side, a lot of people actually work for Isha Group. And it's fantastic to know a lot of people have involved in yoga, especially from Slovenia. So we're grateful to have your contribution and your country contribution to India. Thank you, everyone. My name is Aarein Uday Areti. I'm a councillor, like an elected public representative for City of London. I'm also the vice chair for Europe India Centre for Business and Industry. And I'm the cohort of 2020 under 40, like many of us who share the stage. And I've been involved in India-EU, India-UK relations over the past 10 years. I've been working closely with Sujit, the EICBI group, and all the vice chairs to enhance our relationship and cooperation between EU and India. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if we continue, we started with the latest leaders meeting summit in 2021. And as I mentioned before, one of the most important outcomes was also at the 6th India-EU Summit in September 2005, when it was led by Right Honourable Tony Blair, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Mr. Jose Manuel Barroso, the President of the European Commission at the same time. At that summit, there was an endorsement of India-EU Joint Action Plan. And I would like to start by asking you, what were, in your opinion, the main achievements of this summit, especially of this India Joint Action Plan, and what can we learn from this summit?
Thank you, Your Excellency. As you pointed out, I'm very grateful for our Prime Minister back then, Right Honourable Tony Blair, who wanted this meeting to enhance our partnership. As you rightly said, Madam, that was the time when EU and India have coined the term strategic partnership, which had an action plan. That's probably be the first action plan. The two sides not only had an action plan, the key strategic partnership, but they also declared politically, a political declaration was done on India-EU's strategic partnership. So the action plan looked at many developments such as economic dialogue, cooperation, trade and investments, and several areas including social sector, science and technology, space, energy, clean development, and climate change. Since, as you said, Madam, since 2004, the previous summit had initiated the major strategic partnership between the two largest democracies. When India started engaging, working on broad-based trade and investment agreement, but sadly at that point, although we had 7 rounds of negotiations to have a free trade deal in many sectors, but because back then India was sort of saving the local economy. So not much has been done. Although we had 7 rounds of negotiations, not a single free trade agreement has been established as such. Because at that point, the regulations in India were more protective towards local economy, and the world was just evolving as a global economy. So I guess, regardless of whether the 6th and the 7th summit trade partnership, not much has enhanced, but I would say the key success of that partnership was to actually understand the dialogues between India and EU. If you look at back then, India is just the 19th largest trading partner back then, and EU was roughly about 16th or something, but now it's like I would say it's the 9th largest partnership. So I think you can, some summits may not progress anything, but the initiation itself is a big change. As researcher Benaglia just said, sometimes political decisions matter a lot. Sometimes economic decisions matter a lot. For example, if you look at India-Russia relationships are prospering, and likewise, the Russia relationship with the EU and the West are not going well. So if Indian public, whether India has to trade with Russia, and that most of the people would say yes, because India has got nothing to lose with Russia. And sadly, on the West side, even UK as such, where I live and where I represent the country, the trade relationships or the friendly relationship as the sovereign nations are not going well. So I think we need to look at a bilateral connection and the sentiment of each nation as well. So I would say the 6th, 7th, and even from 2004, the strategic partnership, what the term was coined back then, is historic, because that's exactly when the EU started looking at what India needs, the India started looking at what UK needs. And that was the stepping stone. Although nothing much have happened until 2009, but I think the action plan itself has created enormous opportunity for both nations.
Thank you so much. You indeed right. This joint action plan was actually the first this kind of action plans that India ever had with any of its partners. And of course, to adopt this joint action plan at a time when I would say the relations between India and Europe were strategic, but more in a theory, I would say, than in practice. I think this was a very, very important step in the direction of, practicing the strategic partnership in reality. So, as you said, there were few summits where nothing much has happened, but I think they are important to bridge, between one period of time to the next period of time. So my second question to you would be, how we already spoke about 2021, but how would you evaluate the 14th summit, which was in 2017 in New Delhi, and the 15th one, which was in June 2020? I think this one was...
It was a virtual one. It's a virtual.
Virtual, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Excellency. I think I wouldn't go deeply into the 14th and the 15th, but I think the 15th summit, the shift of the mindset of change from a strategic partnership, we call ourselves as a natural partners. I think the evolution from a strategic partnership to a natural partner itself is a big leap in the relationships between the EU and India. And that's, to sum it up as a 15th summit. I'll come in detail in the next one. But the 14th summit, I think the biggest outcomes and the success is the GDPR rollout, where many of the Indian and the EU companies have adopted. You look at the European Investment Bank in India and a wide range of sectors, in particular, the climate change and renewable energies, and a strong engagement from the investment banks. I think this is one of the kind that never happened before. I know you do have sort of back office sectors, but not really the core operations that happen. So I think 14th Summit, that's one of the highlights. But including different sectors, we're sharing of Navy and missile technologies, the foreign policy and security corporations. But also the EU actually endorsed India's initiatives like Make in India, Digital India, Skill India, Smart Cities. So they actually promoted economic and social development, expressed a keen interest in those areas. And Prime Minister Modi, obviously the biggest shakeup of Indian economy was the GST, introduction of goods and service tax as a uniform throughout India, where the EU were greatly benefited by most of the European companies, because the European companies would have a manufacturing unit in one state, but also, there could be a retail sector in another state. It wasn't uniform. There were more management costs involved in the most accounting costs involved in it. So that this was mostly adopted by the European Union. I think those were the highlights of 14 Summit. As I said, 15 Summit, it's a different shift. I mean, we became from a strategic partner, which is sort of a trade exchange, to a natural partner. By this time, we knew that both EU and India could help each other in many ways, not just on the trade and investment, but also on the cultural side of it, also on the human element of it, protecting the human rights, for example. So having a common framework. But if you look at the 15th Summit, most of the topics that were discussed was not bilateral between the EU and India. It was more of a multilateralism, aligning with the NATO World Trade Center, the NATO and the World Trade Organization, which gives a global perspective of our relations. So we not only have, whether you call it regulations, which would align for both India and the EU, but also it's multilateral, so that any regulation that we establish would be common across WTO. I think that was the key success. 15 Summit is all about understanding, the whole world suffered with COVID, the pandemic, and combating COVID crisis was one of the biggest missions we probably haven't seen after the World War. So I think EU and its countries, India, especially with the pharma production, could enhance global cooperation. And you could see India have actually produced for over 90 nations, including many of the European nations. So reducing less regulation from Indian manufacturing, the EU had done a very great job, especially India benefited from those less regulations during pandemic. On a global scale, outside COVID, I think it's all about high-tech AI, 5G rollout, and data protection. As I said before, GDPR was rolled out earlier in the 14th Summit. And those were the key picks. And I guess by this time, most of these summits and the regulations or the benefits were mostly taken by Germany and France. And I would really love to see other European nations benefiting, not just Germany and France and other nations like Netherlands and Denmark as such, but I want other nations like Poland, Slovenia, Slovakia, Romania need to benefit. I mean, if you look at one of the IT companies based in India have centers in Romania and Poland, I want them to extend more into the Eastern European, so that it's not just Germany and France benefiting. And I know they probably control the European Union as such. They probably have more power in that sense. People might disagree in one respect, but I want the whole of European Union want to trade with India as such, so that all nations benefit, India benefit, and it's a great exemplary to the whole world how two greatest democracies can work together for a better world.
Thank you so much. And I would just perhaps give you a little bit of optimism of what you just mentioned at the end. I must say that being here in India, you can see very positive stories also from the Eastern European or Central European countries. I mean, I would say that Czech Republic has a very good economic relations. There are many investments from India in Slovak Republic, in Hungary, I think even in Romania. And I would also say that there is much more attention and understanding on the side of the Indian government, which definitely reflects in the increased visits of Indian high government representatives in these countries. You know, the president, the vice president visit, the external minister is very active. So I do see a positive development in that area. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Excellency, I want to see more and more Slovenia India relations as well. Thank you. With that note, I end up, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Now, if you allow me, we will move to Professor Stefano Greco. He's professor and founder director at Chitkara Spaak Center for Multidisciplinary European Studies at Chitkara University, Punjab. Professor Greco, the floor is yours. And hello.
Thank you so much.
Introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. So I think that to introduce myself, I am a very shy person, so it doesn't help to be online because, you know, when you are in actually physical meeting, everything is much more natural, but this is the time. So how can I introduce myself? So the first things I can tell you that I'm in Punjab. I've been in India for the last 9 years. So I will say that I'm not an EU-India expert. I'm an EU-India activist because I'm on the spot. So basically my life, even too much, I actually will say is all an EU-India relationship based. So from my office to my home is everything an EU-India. So in my office, what I do, the first things, I'm a sui generis professor. So everyone think, really you teach? Yes, I also teach. And my last 8-9 years of actually life work, as I told you, was really based on EU-India. For the first 2-3 years here in India, I was teaching, and I was teaching mainly, and I'm still teaching what is the European Union to Indians. So which sounds as a very easy topic, but it's very complex because EU is a very strange animal, and is a animal that is keep changing. I would love to speak with the former member of the parliament from the actually UK. We could have fight for hours, okay? Because EU, of course, is not a bloc, and if EU was a actually bloc, UK would be still inside the EU. Okay, so that's why I love actually European Union. The first things because I can take actually break from my EU-India life, and also because it's an open book. It's something that you can always explore. To close this introduction, what I've done and why I was actually selected as EU-India Young Leader. Basically, in these last 8-9 years, I just saw around myself, and I saw everywhere chance of opportunity for cooperation in the field of academia and also civil society. So what I did, I saw some possible projects, and in the last years, I got 10 projects approved for an amount of funds of 3 million euro, something very important that I always want to say. Out of this money, I don't take a single euro, which is very important for me. And all this money go to persons from academia, civil society interested to establish bridge between Europe and India. So basically, in a nutshell, I've been literally donate my life to the EU-India. In a nutshell. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I think you're doing a very important job, you know, to bring closer European Union to the Indian population. So we definitely value your work a lot. And so far we have spoken about summits, which we know mostly happen between government to government, right? Also, it's focused mainly on the results which needs or outcomes which needs to be implemented by the government. But sitting where you are, I would say in the civil society or academic arena, perhaps the summits encouraged also the cooperation between non-governmental stakeholders. or have they pushed people to collaborate, cooperate, and understand better each other?
So what I was thinking what could be the answer. And I have this problem that I'm Italian and I always think about food. And I could tell you that for me, summits are like the Easter. They help things to grow up. There are very often you could hear actually criticize the last summit did not have any output, but still we always had a very important output that is news. So you have on the Indian news, mostly in the last 2-3 years, the EU-India summit is always on the spotlight. So this helps, even if it can be actually criticized, because we can say they never sign any FTA agreement, so there is no actually free trade agreement. At the same time, the visibility that a summit provide incentivate other stakeholders to collaborate. I gonna be the first to say a name that is still to be mentioned, but everyone is thinking about, of course, China. So EU has focused on China for a long time. And I have the feeling that in actually Europe, what was possible to be explored with EU-China has been explored. Now it is time where many actors are looking for India because they don't know nothing and they would love to explore. So if we expand it, and I can actually draw a correlation between the summit and an incredible actually growth in terms of network in business. Business in the past, the big actually players are always in here, has always been in here, and they are in here from the time of the time. But what I actually notice now is a big interest of small, medium enterprise. Academia, we have a lot of ongoing cooperation. Just to give you a number, I think in only one action of the Erasmus Plus in India, more than 90 Indian universities have participated. Okay, so it's a huge number. Civil society during the last actually summit has been a parallel summit by the civil society organization. And art, we have cinema, painting, something is actually moving also from the art, which is of course not the most important part, but is the most creative part. Okay, so this is what I think. So that actually summit are indirectly boosting EU-India relation. Okay, and also they help with this actually growing the civil society, for actually instance, also to actually bring to the floor critical voice, which are always very helpful because, of course, during the summit, certain aspects cannot be talked out. So civil society, business actor can be much more free while talking and while interacting, and they also bring solution potentially. I hope that I answered to the question.
No, you have, of course. I think that the success of the summit depends also how it penetrates among the people, among the business community, among the civil society. And in that respect, I think we, the diplomats, have to rely and connect much more with people like you. Thank you so much, Professor Greco. Now, if we can move to Professor Nidhi Piplani Kapur, that Symbiosis Center for European Studies at Symbiosis International University. Ms. Kapur, if you would say a few words about yourself, please.
Thank you, Her Excellency. Before I introduce myself, I would like to thank Europe India Center for Business and Industry for curating such engaging forums for us to deliberate and celebrate 60 years of EU-India relations. Thanks, Sujit, Arun, and the team. It's great to be part of this panel with elite colleagues who have brought in varied perspectives to the discussion. Myself, I'm Nidhi Piplani Kapur, as just mentioned by Her Excellency. I'm the head of Symbiosis Center for European Studies at Symbiosis International University, and we are based in Pune, which is in the western part of India, in Maharashtra. I've been wearing two hats of a teacher in the area of economics and strategy and leading the initiatives in internationalization of higher education. I've also served on the General Council as the only Indian representation on the board of European Association for International Education that is headquartered in the Netherlands. My role at Symbiosis, which is of the head of the Center for European Studies, we've been focusing more towards research and innovation in terms of internationalization of higher education and collaborating and bringing together faculty, students, researchers, and also we have created a student think tank that deliberates on different policy matters related to Europe, and we are the first chapters of European Horizons, which is a global policy-led student incubator that started at Yale University, and now we have that in India. And now I think Manipal has also joined the European Horizons group. So all of this work actually brought me closer to the delegation of European Union to India and also the member states. And that's how Her Excellency and I started working together on various projects, which we are very proud of. And last year, I was recognized as the 40 under 40 leader by Europe India Center for Business and Industry. And since then, we are working with Sujit and the team and supporting them as academic partners also for this event today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kapur. As you said, and as I mentioned earlier, science and technology was established as one of the priorities already at the first EU-India summit in 2000. And education cooperation was part of the EU-India cooperation already pre-summit era. And I think we would all agree that this, in the past few years, this has transformed very strongly into research and innovation cooperation. And parallel to this, I would also say that climate change has become a cross-cutting issue in all the aspects of EU-India cooperation, and so also in the research and innovation and education. So I would like to ask you, how do you think the EU and India cooperate in improving research and development in science and technology, especially with regard to recent popular issues like climate change and clean energy?
Thank you for that question, Her Excellency. This reminds me of the former president of America, United States of America, the late Franklin D. Roosevelt, who once said that democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is in education, research, and innovation. And no wonder India and EU are two big democracies united through this thread. So thank you very much for this question. The initiatives pioneered through R&D and innovation in science and technology by both EU and India significantly contribute to research in the fields of climate change and clean energy. In times where climate change has forced us to rethink our patterns, especially with COVID, both EU and India have emerged as nations that are actively involved in climate change mitigation and a switch to renewable and sustainable sources of living. So the EU and India have assumed a leading role in fighting climate change and have increasingly been cooperating with each other at public and private sector levels. They have agreed partnerships on sectoral issues such as clean energy, water, urban development, and the EU is supporting several Indian projects on climate action, sustainability, and clean energy. There have been numerous treaties and agreements signed, including the Clean Energy and Climate Partnership, the Climate Smart Cities Alliance, to name a few. And at their 15th summit, which was held in July 2020, the EU and India placed a strong focus on climate change and reaffirmed their commitment to cooperate for the implementation of the Paris Agreement and to engage constructively in its first global stock-taking that is going to be held in 2023. So this exchange of know-how is commendable testimony to the kind of partnership both parties share. Even considering the fact that both EU and India are on different development trajectories, they have emphasized the importance on green technologies and practices in their own ways. And the fact that this understanding has existed right from the beginning of the strategic partnership is an amazing feat. Much of it's owing to the exchange of knowledge and resources and the research and innovation cooperation in science and technology that both parties have tirelessly pursued since the beginning. And I can say with conviction that there is much more to come with this flourishing relationship. So a lot is already happening. Both the EU and India are exchanging know-how and information about how they can reduce their emissions and footprints. And I'm positive that India will be utilizing European research and policy to create its own climate change legislation very soon. The EU-India summits have consistently highlighted that R&D on this key issue as the aspect of their relations.
Thank you so much. As you said, there is already a lot of joint projects going on. I think in that respect, Horizon 2020 was very, very beneficial to both sides. The exchanges and the joint pilot projects were numerous. This is supposed to continue with Horizon Europe now. I heard there were some hiccups there at the moment, but I'm sure we'll be able to overcome these problems and we'll continue with successful cooperation. According to you, where does education, diplomacy, and research fit in today's EU-India dynamic?
Well, education is a critical element in the soft power politics between EU and India. More than 50,000 Indian students pursue their higher education in EU universities, dominantly in the area of engineering, management, medical sciences, IT, humanities, and you can name any course under the sun. With the development of education diplomacy, aspects of student mobility have also emerged as important factors in improving the education facilities and access. Several scholarship programs offered to students and researchers through Erasmus+, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe that we're talking, they all provide financial assistance to students and researchers wanting to pursue their higher education or research in Europe. So there are programs even for internship and employment opportunities, along with provision of visa and immigration facilities. And all this has made it very convenient and flexible for students and has become like a foundation, a very strong soft power, I would say, for the EU-India relations. And in terms of the knowledge diplomacy, both parties have had a continuous line of communication and a mutual understanding for the need to foster and encourage research on healthcare, policy, environment and sustainability, which is the need of the hour, conservation. So the recent EU-India summit is testimony to this communication fostering, and with the global pandemic putting a question mark on everything we have ever considered to be normal, it has become even more important for this emphasis to be placed on access to education, healthcare, environmental initiatives, and so on. So education and exchanges in research, science, technology, professional activities in the area of IT, environment, climate change, business, tourism have been given recognition in the discussion. In fact, there was a project which was on the common agenda on migration and mobility, which focused on better management of mobility and sustainability of migration that was put in place, which helped improve access to information for better policy formulations, promotion of knowledge transfer between India and Europe, along with capacity building and better technical support. So this has made it highly convenient for students to aspire for a European higher education. And this kind of an environment has ensured maximum growth for students and greater cultural interactions between both EU and India. We have had many students coming for exchanges. We do not at present have too many students on full-time programs in India, and I hope that the Study in India programs, this is my wish, that they kind of promote it in a much better fashion, that we look towards getting more European Indian integration through students from Europe coming for full-time degree seeking programs in India. And lastly, the research partnerships between the two nations have extended to many different aspects, and the progress has ensued by the India-EU Science and Technology Agreement, which ensured that research and innovation will continue to foster and transition to greener technologies, will create an environment of mutual cooperation. So India's scientific base and manpower, coupled with EU's eagerness to promote joint R&D, creates greater possibility for a bright future in knowledge exchange, education, and research.
Thank you so much. I'm in complete agreement with you that research and innovation is in the interest, growing interest in the both sides. I think because we also realize that this is the area where we can achieve the most progress for better future. So, and you also already answered the question which arose in my head. What about the attracting European students to India? So I am very happy to hear that there is an encouraging trend in this also. So we finished with the panelist discussion now. We have, I think, a few minutes still on, about 5 to 7 minutes. So if there are any questions, please ask them. I see one in the chat box, which is, what is the value of trade between your country and India currently? Is it going up or down? I would gather that this is addressed to me. I'm very happy to say that despite the pandemic, our trade has it did diminish a little bit, but it has a very positive trend. So we are quite optimistic about it. Of course, if we compare ourselves to other bigger European countries, our trade is not so huge. It's around 360 million euros with the deficit on the Indian side. But I can tell you this is not such a small number when we talk about Slovenian trade outside European Union or Europe. It's actually, if we look only at Asia, it's the second. India is the second most important trade partner for our companies, and we do have quite few investments of high-end technologies here in India. So, any more questions?
Yeah, I think we have few. I have one question to start off with, and then I think we have few questions which we have quite a bit of time before we'll have our next speaker, Mr. Soren Gate, the European Member of Parliament, joins us. So one of the questions which I have is that considering the learnings from the EU-India summits which we have held over the years, what suggestions or opinion will be there which will probably help in reaching to some stage in the FTA discussions, considering the way where the UK-India FTA discussions are going on quite positively. Considering what we have learned from the EU-India summits, you guys have any opinions or thoughts on what can be the next step, which will probably move the EU-India FTA discussion by probably an inch forward? Any thoughts looking forward to hearing from you? Sure.
Is that Professor Greco?
So if I can answer, for me, the most pragmatic things is to scale down exploitation, even if it has to be only a symbolic FTA, it has to be signed as soon as possible. This would allow to take out this expectation pressure that doesn't help no one. So even a symbolic as a sign of friendship and commitment, a very simple FTA linked to few area, very few area, could be a great steps. Very pragmatic, simple, and symbolic. And this would allow all the possible stakeholders to have to look to the actually future with more optimism. This, I think, is something very, very important because we need some flagship achievement, some flag that can be shown, because we have many milestones, but we don't have some flag to be shown.
Well, thank you so much. I would also like to hear what Ms. Stefania Benaglia would think about this question. What would be your answer to?
Thanks. It's actually an answer to both, also to what has just been said by Professor Greco. The point is that I'm afraid somehow this is not the way the EU thinks. At the end of the day, the EU is not a sovereign, a sole sovereign state. It has, it's something else. And the problem is that for good or for bad, and on this I actually see the good side of it, when it speaks to India, it speaks to the rest of the world. So for the EU, it is extremely difficult to behave in double standard vis-a-vis India versus vis-a-vis anyone else. So I'm afraid that consistency in the way it does business, notably it concludes its FTA, is quite important, is paramount for the EU, because it knows very well that the day it behaves one way, it will be held accountable in the future, and someone else, or even, even the same bilateral relation, will ask for kind of like the same special treatment in the future. So I am afraid that this is not really going to be an easy thing to be accepted for this contextual. So I'm not saying that the theory doesn't hold any merit. I see the added value of progressing and putting something concrete on the table, I think, is undeniable. Everybody agrees on that. Everybody within the EU as well, of course. But the point is that there is some degree of reluctance because, of course, if the EU starts using this approach of, okay, let's start for now to put on the table on the things on what we agree on. First of all, its own, its constituency, the ones that are having trouble, will say, wait, what about us? I mean, you're giving preference to certain constituency over other constituency. Again, the EU is a very different entity from a sovereign member state, a sovereign state, because a sovereign state, big or small that it is, has its own direct link. And has a different dynamic than the EU with the relation with its own member states and the constituency of its own. So it's a much more complex system. And I'm really afraid that this approach would not be, again, would set a precedent that the EU today is not ready to set as precedent, because it sees all the danger of going down this road and where it could lead. And especially because it holds quite some, I mean, there's another big discussion that goes on within the EU, which is, what do we do with what we preach? Do we want to stick accountable? Do we want to really, you know, be consistent with the values that we own true for ourselves? I mean, do we want to walk the talk, or are we only, you know, saying empty words? This, again, this is a very internal discussion that is going on, because these, you know, the examples there are endless, treatment of its own member states, things that go on within the EU that are in question marks. So this is very much a discussion inward looking rather than outward looking. But this is another, it's not ready yet to let it go, this kind of discussion. So the whole, of course, everybody expect, and I think this is actually also a misplaced expectation as well, the famous difficult discussion that will come on the sustainability clause, which I do not think actually is a de facto problem, is a communication problem. But these are two different things. What I mean with this is, de facto, what we are talking about, we all agree. Because what is, if we go to read what is written in these clauses, we all signed to agree and to implement those clauses. So it's not a de facto problem. The communication problem is that, of course, every time any sovereign state tell another sovereign state, you do what I tell you, you kind of like, oh, follow my template. That is a problematic approach. So that is the communication problem that I see with the sustainability clause, rather than what is actually going to be written in these clauses, which is not so problematic. So because of all these reasons, I don't think we're going to go towards a fast approval of the FTA just to have something on the table. I see the merit for doing that, but I can also see why there's some reluctance in doing it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Nair, do we have a bit more time, or should we?
Yeah, we do. We do have time. Ma'am, I would also like to get your opinion on this. I understand that you would all be part of the discussion on this. I'm sure there will be a few confidential information which you not share, but at least some of your thoughts on where can this next step go. It's been almost 15 years now since the discussion started in 2007, and we're not sure where can be the next step. Any of your thoughts? In addition, we also have another question. So once you give your short, we can go into the next question after.
No, I would. I have the understanding for Professor Greco and also for Ms. Stefania Benaglia. I mean, what Ms. Stefania presented is the reality. And I do think that there is political will to take a step forward, and there is communication going on between Brussels and New Delhi. I think that at the moment, the both sides are kind of discussing or exchanging the views. What are, I would say, what is the framework? What are the red lines which would represent some problems in the negotiations? I think. Once this is clear between the two sides, there should be the start of negotiations, and I hope this can happen in a few months. But you know, it's always unpredictable. But there definitely is a political will. I think. I mean, it was expressed at and agreed at the Porto Leadership Summit. And as Ms. Benaglia said earlier, we have to overcome now this discrepancy between the political will and the implementation. but I am optimistic about it.